So Mario and Luigi Brothership, the upcoming Mario and Luigi RPG game that releases this week for the Nintendo Switch, had its reviews go up this morning. The embargo was lifted, and one review is getting a bit of a stank eye from a lot of the Nintendo fan base, and it just happens to come from a company that a lot of people do have quite a bit of distrust when it comes to, and that is IGN. Now, let's be clear about this. I am not someone who is a big fan of IGN. I genuinely dislike some people at IGN, but I do think there are a few good people over there. Brian Altano is a good guy, but IGN obviously has a bit of an identity crisis when it comes to things. And it's very easy to look at their scores for some games and be like, well, that seems way too high. And then you get a Mario and Luigi game coming in at a 5 out of 10, and people are ready to crucify the website, and maybe rightfully so. But I like to go a little bit above and beyond when we're talking about a large website like this, such as read the actual review, see what problems are brought up, and also see the track record of the individual that reviewed this game. Because you got to remember, all because it falls under the IGN banner doesn't mean it's the same person reviewing all of those games. And yes, some games do get ridiculous scores from IGN, but I actually wanted to read this review because honestly, I was kind of on the fence about this game. You know, I didn't really like the graphical style that they used in the trailer. Of course, this is a series that has been pretty much regulated to handhelds and hasn't made the jump over to consoles yet. And when you're looking at the handheld games at $30 or $40, you could kind of get away with more things than you would in a $60 release of a full game. Plus, let's be realistic. This is probably a filler title for the Nintendo Switch. It's coming out at the tail end of the system's life cycle. So we're going to look at this review, and we're going to see if this review is fair or unfair based on what is said in the review and based on the track record of the individual who did this review. So like I said, we're going to look at all of this now. IGN has a lot of freaking ads on their website, so I'm going to be tiptoeing around here when it comes to reading some of this stuff. But this is kind of an area that kind of struck me right off of the gate when it comes to this game. Speaking of kids, several choices in Brothership make it feel like baby's first RPG. It probably will be for plenty of kids out there, so that it isn't inherently a bad thing. But this is the rare game starring Mario that feels designed specifically for ages 6 to 12 rather than 6 to 66. 666? Come on, pal. The tutorials dialogue are constantly holding your hands. For example, almost any time you enter a new area, the camera slowly pans over to your objective and slowly pans back, followed by an excruciating long explanation from the new assistant, Snoutlet, who basically spells out exactly what you need to do. The dialogue repeatedly reminds you of the overarching story and objective, and Brothership spends far too much of its already bloated 34-hour runtime rehashing the same notes. I lost count of how many times new characters were shocked to learn Mario and Luigi were on a mission to reconnect all of Concordia's islands. Plus, the large font size means only roughly a dozen words tops can fit into a single dialogue bubble, so you're always mashing the A button to get to the next line in this unsufferably long scenes. And I mean, I think that's a fair thing. If the game is, you know, the thing about Mario and Luigi games were, you know, it didn't really have that strict hand-holding mechanic. You know, there was some discovery with it. There was some, there was some interesting dialogue as well within those games. It always felt like Mario and Luigi games were Mario games, but in a different vein than what you saw with most traditional Mario games. And that could come down to the original development studio no longer being around that were making these games. So, you know, a fair assessment. They go on to say that the humor and story are just not very good. There's unfunny puns, there's a joke, and all this sort of stuff. And the jokes just kind of keep going on, which you know, can be a bit repetitive. But are you really playing a Mario game, you know, for the story? You know, that's something that a lot of people can kind of bring up with this. You know, there's some original characters here. The islands themselves are all very generic. Fire, ice, and desert settings. Okay, you know, it's not sounding like an excruciating experience, but it definitely doesn't seem like a top tier experience, or taking the formula from the handheld games and accurately translating it into a console game with more style and flair. But you know, it's just basically safe is one of the words that is used here. So, okay, that's fine. And you could see here, you know, the good old handheld ones, because this was a handheld series before making the jump. The whole adventure would probably pop more if it didn't run so badly. This is easily one of the worst performing Nintendo games on the Switch. Worse than Link's Awakening, but not quite to the level of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, with incessant frame rate issues while exploring the overworld. Brothership chugs and stutters basically anytime there's any sort of environmental element present, whether it's moving water, lava, sand, wind, or fog. That's a pretty major problem for a quest set entirely on the ocean. It's not only unpleasant to look at, it can cause issues during some platforming segments that require precisely timed jumps. Performance is more reliable during the smaller amount of time when you're inside a dungeon or a building, and I noticed the frame rate wasn't quite as bad when playing in handheld mode. But if you're looking forward to to Mario and Luigi series finally making the jump to a home console, I'm sorry to report that I simply didn't enjoy playing Brothership on my television and don't recommend it. That is a problem. And that is a problem that I think flies under the radar for way too many Nintendo Switch games, especially first-party games. Third-party games, you could give companies a little bit more leeway because of the fact that these are third-party games. These are not the people who design the hardware. They are taking the hardware and doing the most that they can with it. But when it's a first-party game that has glaring technical issues, that is a concern. Nintendo is usually great at getting the most out of their hardware when it comes to their first-party games. And when the first-party games are struggling, that just shows a lack of optimization for the game that you are making for the system that it releases on. And I do think that is a problematic thing, that Nintendo definitely gets a pass way more than other companies. If a first-party PlayStation or Xbox game has technical issues on it with things like frame rate and performance, it's brought up. But for whatever reason, Nintendo seems to get a pass with that. And I definitely don't think it is fair at all. I think you should be level across the board with it. So if we have technical issues with this game that actually impact the gameplay, such as platforming, that seems like a serious issue. Like, I'm not having a problem with this review thus far because of the fact that, you know, we haven't seen anything that's egregious, you know, so let's keep going. Luigi takes the L. It's not bad in a vacuum. He follows right behind his brother. The odd thing is, it seems like they were designed for the old style, but now are rendered completely pointless. So the gameplay has indeed changed for it as well. When it comes to, you know, it's more like an NPC ally than a second protagonist. He follows Mario at a disconnected, awkward distance that can jump on his own without the press of a button. And many puzzles revolve around simply ordering Luigi to automatically do something for you, which is completely different than the other games. Like, you would switch back and forth and Luigi would do things for you. That's what made it interesting. That's what made it fun. That's what made the puzzles unique in this. But it seems like everything has kind of been streamlined a bit, and I think that would, you know, kind of put a damper on things when it comes to the gameplay. There's Luigi's logic where he has an epiphany. Okay. And I mean, he does seem to like some of the gameplay. You know, the boss battles are great or whatever. The turn-based combat is pretty good as well. So all of that seems okay, you know, and that's cool. But it doesn't seem like, you know, it's really a reinvention in a positive way or an advancement of the gameplay. It's just kind of doing things like that. So, you know, I don't have a problem with that. There's enemy pattern types and stuff like that. And it is what it is when it comes to that. You know, there is modifiers that you could do within it as well. Battle plugs. Okay, you know, that's cool. Even the great combat wears thin before the end of the adventure, though, because the combat seems to be the best part of it. Without going into spoilerly specifics, the final third of the campaign is a complete slog that adds nothing of substance beyond retreading the mediocre exploration and puzzle solving of the first 20+ hours. Brothership kept stringing me along and running in circles to the point where I feel like I was disrespecting my time. I probably would have left with a much more positive impression as a whole if it ended around the 25-hour mark, because even the combat started to feel tired and repetitive as I was going through the motions to reach the conclusion. And padding is another thing that I am not a big fan of. So then you get the verdict here. Luigi's role in puzzle solving stinks. The story is too, linear and simplistic. There's performance issues, and they give the game a 5 out of 10. Apart from its great battle system, Brothership is an incredibly disappointing revival that suffers from boring gameplay and dialogue, a bloated runtime, shockingly bad performance, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made the series great. So I don't, my whole thing with reviews is, if you're bashing a game and then you give the game a 7, or if a game clearly has issues with it and you're overscoring it because of a namesake or because you want the game to be successful, that is a problematic thing. But when we're talking about someone who's obviously a fan of the previous games and understands the previous games and stuff like that, and they're having issues with things like performance and gameplay and the changing of things and not really advancing the series, in some ways taking a step back, would people be so upset about this? How did people react to Amiibo Festival on the Wii U, which was, one of the worst rated games of all time? Did people get super upset about that? But like I said, you have to look at who the person reviewing is and what other games they have reviewed. Because if this is the person that gave like Concord a 7, then sure, grab the pitchforks and let's get ready. More reviews. Super Mario Party Jamboree, they gave it a 9. The Plucky Squire gave it a 7. Super Monkey Ball Banana Rumble gave it an 8. So, obviously this person is familiar with Nintendo titles and things of that nature. I think a lot of people are just surprised to see a Nintendo game, a first-party game that stars Mario, get kind of a low score in it. But to me, there have been games that are first-party Nintendo games that probably deserve a lower score than they end up getting but they don't get it because of the character that's in the game. You know what I'm saying? Like, I do feel like Nintendo games do get a little bit of a higher score sometimes because of things like nostalgia and the previous characters within it. Honestly, I'm not here to defend IGN, but I don't have a problem with this review. I don't. Maybe a 6 would have been a little bit easier to swallow or something like that. But if the words match the score and the track record of the individual shows that they don't really have any sort of negative biases towards things, you have to give, even if a person you hate is right about something, you have to give that person credit. But we're in this blind hate era of video games and video game journalism where, even if someone that you hate is potentially right about something or manages to back up their words, you automatically just write it off. And then because it goes against what you believe. Like, have you played the game yet? Like, maybe the game is a bit of a technical mess. Maybe fans of the franchise, diehard fans, such as this individual who seems to know their history, maybe diehard fans won't be pleased with this game. Maybe some of these other review scores that are much higher weren't fans of the previous game, so don't know the pedigree that this game has to live up to. I'm just trying to give you a different perspective on this, because it's very easy to sit there and type LOL IGN sucks because they gave the game that you were looking forward to a 5 out of 10. But if you actually read the review and the review kind of backs up what the person is saying, and the person writing the review has a decent track record when it comes to reviewing first-party Nintendo games, like, can you really be mad at it? Like, isn't this what you want? You want to be potentially informed? Like, I don't like when a game gets, everyone gives the game a 10 out of 10. Because that seems weird to me. Somebody out there has to dislike it. Somebody has to, not get down with it. And, it's not contrarian. It's just what your specific tastes are. So I don't know, man. I don't know. I'm just bringing up some points here. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with this score. Maybe the game is better than a 5 out of 10. But maybe it's not. We haven't played the game yet. And if someone who is obviously a fan of the previous games didn't really seem to like it, I think you got to respect it, whether you love IGN or whether you hate them. And I understand most people hate them. I'm not a fan of IGN. You got to respect what this person is saying. because they back it up in their words and with previous reviews. Or you could just shit all over them. I don't really care. I just found this to be very interesting because so many people were just jumping off the deep end without actually reading the review and looking into the person who wrote the review to see if, like, you know, they have some sort of weird bias about something. And I'm not really seeing one. That's just me, though. Let me know what you think in the comments section down below. And as always, guys, thank you for checking out this video. If you are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Be sure to like, comment, and share. Give me your thoughts, man. I get it. It's fun to dunk on IGN. I do it all the time. But if someone is right about something or someone manages to back up what they are saying with their, you know, they give a crazy score to a game, but they manage to back up what they're saying, like, you know, at the end of the day, it's just an opinion. It's just one person's opinion on the game, but this person seems to have a love for previous Nintendo games. And as always, guys, I'll catch you guys on the next video. Later.